Welcome to chapter 15. The chapter 15 discussed about the evaluation studies shifted from control settings to natural settings. The goals of this chapter includes the understanding of usability testing, outlining the basics of conducting experiments, describe how to carry out in the wild studies. It also discuss about the remote studies or remote evaluations and the need to carry out remote evaluations and the procedures involved in carrying out the in the field studies. With the studies, we mean evaluations. Evaluations might include questionnaires or interviews. Let us understand what is usability testing. As the name says, when we try to evaluate the working of a digital product or rather any product by giving it to the users and watching them that how they use it. The goal is to identify how correctly or how badly the product is working in the real world with the real users in the control settings. Usability testing in HCI is very important method to evaluate how user-friendly and efficient a system or an interface works. It needs to watch carefully the real users as they interact with the product with the goal to identify the issues or the areas of improvement for that particular product. The people being tested are observed, and the time it takes them to complete the task is also recorded. The number of errors, the kind of errors are also recorded. Data is recorded on video, and even the key presses are logged in order to carry out any work on a digital product. The data is then used to calculate the performance, time, and to identify and explain the errors. User satisfaction is evaluated using questionnaires and interviews. Observations about how the product is used in more natural contexts, including the in the wild, may also be included. Here is a setup of a usability lab. If you see, these are the two persons who are, can you see my cursor? Yeah, okay, you can see. These are the two persons who are actually evaluating the digital product. And the people here are watching them. The usability lab is equipped with a camera installed in the control settings where the evaluators are sitting and evaluating. And the persons who are carrying out the experiment is watching them closely by using a mirror and a recording one way. Quantitative measures. Number of participants are very important in order to successfully complete the task. Quantitative measures tell that what are the necessary things in order to carry out the usability testing. Number of participants, time to complete the task, time to complete task after time, after some gap, number and type of errors per task, number of errors per unit of time, number of time people navigate to an item such as online help, all are, number of time, number of errors, number of people, types and kinds of error, and the time to completion are all quantitative approach measures that are needed in usability testing. The number of participants successfully completing the task is very important. For example, in the previous example, we see there are two participants. They are being watched and they are being given to complete a usability test on a product. The time, how much they need to complete a given task is also very important to record. The time to complete the task after time away from it is also very important. Number and type of errors that happen while carrying out any task is also very important. Number of errors that happen per unit of time is also recorded. Number of times people navigate to an item such as online help is also recorded. Number of people making the same or similar errors are also recorded in order to understand more details about the common errors that are happening around. Layout of a usability lab is given in this slide, where we see there is a usability lab and observation room. Observation room is equipped with a TV monitor and it has a plenty or sufficient place where the participants can sit and they can interact. They are being monitored by using the TV monitor and a camera, and they are how this way connected to the usability testing room, usability lab, wherein the evaluators or the researchers who are carrying out the usability testing usually sits and watch the participants. As the remote testing and in the wild testings are becoming very common, the equipments to record the videos and the audios are also getting smaller. As you see here, we have a TV monitor and we have, a big recorders or video recorders, or we have cameras. They all are getting smaller in size and greater in efficiency over time. Here is an example of an eye tracking system called as Toby glasses. As more testing is done nowadays remotely and in the wild equipments, and in the wild, we will talk about what is in the wild shortly, but just remember that this is a way of how the usability testing can also be carried out. This is an approach in which one of the approach in which the UT can be carried out. New lightweight models of eye tracking glasses that look like ordinary glasses are given to the user to wear it. When the user uh, closes the eye or make an eye movement, these glasses can even track the movement of eyeballs. Video and recording nowadays are done using simple mobile, normal smartphones, wherein the camera size is very small and carrying the camera becomes very easy because the user or the participant or the researcher uses the mobile phone, which can easily produce high quality videos, thus replacing bulky recording devices and the tripods with small cameras, which are very much efficient, that are installed in the mobile phones. Now, let us understand how the remote testing works. Participants can carry out tasks in their own environment without an evaluator. It means like, for example, you would be given a digital product or an app to test on your own in your home or in your workplace. At that time, you become a participant, and evaluator is a person who is carrying out or who wants this product to be tested. So there is no need for the tester to be present. For example, if I give you an app to do some kind of usability testing on it, then you do it at your own pace in your home. Then you are the participant working remotely or testing remotely, and I am the evaluator not present with you at that time. This type of setting is called as remote setting. Digital communication tools like Zoom and Teams have played a vital role in carrying out remote testing at lower cost with wide acceptability. Testing can be done synchronously or asynchronously. Asynchronously is more advantageous over synchronous, which means that several participants can be tested at the same time in their environment. COVID-19 pandemic encouraged or created many creative ways of conducting remote testing that was safe. Remote testing may make it easier for people with disabilities to participate. Remote testing makes it easier for participant to, do the the usability testing at their own home. They don't need to come to the lab. So it becomes very easier for disabled person to do this usability testing remotely. But what is the disadvantage? What is the downside of remote testing? No one is present to help with equipment problems if the user or if the participant is not very technical. If the participant is a novice user, if he's a new user, then if he gets any problem in managing the equipment, then there is no one present to help at this particular time. So no one present to help with equipment problems and less personal and then co-present testing. So it is like, if it is remote, obviously the new user, if he faces any problems in managing a new equipment or testing a new equipment, then the evaluator is not present at that place to help him out. This is the downside of remote testing. Case 1, iPad usability. Now, a classic study is presented in this slide, which was innovative and was done in a day. The study was conducted in two cities, Fremont and Chicago, on iPad usability. Test had to be done very quickly as the information was needed by third-party app developers. Also needed to be done secretly so that the competitions was not aware of the study before the iPad was launched. So it means like you are trying to evaluate the usability of a digital product even before launching it. But when you do it in in a remote or a remote setting, or in the natural setting, or in the wild setting, you know that the participants are novice, are common users, are novice user. They are not, they cannot be, or they are not from they might not be from the staff. So they can be any common people who will try to interact with the technology or the digital product that you have made. So high chances are there that the information, the confidential information about your digital product can be stolen or revealed even before it is launched. Hence, the confidentiality is very important. So you see here in this case study, the information was kept secretly so that the competition should not get awareness of the study before the iPad was launched. Seven participants with over 3 months experience with iPhones were employed to do this iPad usability testing. The usability testing involves the real user. Hence, recruiting the users can be expensive. So, some evaluators prefer having limited number of participants, like 7 to 5 are usually enough over period of time. Before the usability testing procedure is carried out, there are few things that evaluator must make sure with the participant. Firstly, the evaluator needs a signed and informed consent or permission from the participant by explaining or providing the below information. For example, what the participants would be asked to do in the experiment should be told to the participant beforehand, before starting the usability testing. The length of the time needed for the study, the compensation or the payback to the participant on doing the usability testing should also be told to the participants, because they are giving you their time. They need to be paid back. It can be in a form of a salary or a gift or a perk or something. Participants' right to withdraw. The participants must be explained that if they want to stop and withdraw from the research in the middle of the work, they can do that. A promise that person's identity would not be disclosed. So it has to be confidential, that the person who have the participants' information will not be disclosed. An agreement is also made that the data collected will be kept confidential and will be available or will be made available only to the evaluators. Participants were asked to explore the iPad. Next, they were asked to perform randomly assigned specified tasks. The tasks that were given to the participants to carry out on the iPad were on specific apps or the websites that include iBook. For example, they were asked to download a free copy of Adventure in the Wonderland and read through the first few pages. First few pages. For example, they were asked to visit to the eBay website, and they were asked to buy a new iPad on eBay. Find one that could be buy from a rep, or the task given for them was, you want to buy a new iPad on eBay, find one that could buy from a reputable seller. Kayak. For example, they were asked to visit Kayak app. Okay, and they were asked to make or plan a trip to the Death Valley in May this year and find a hotel located in the park or close to the park. So if you see, these were the apps on which the users were asked to perform this task, and they were watched while they were doing so. Like for example, the participants were watched on how much time they were taking to find a free mulch for their garden while using Craigslist app. For example, how long were the participants taking to browse throughout the magazine and find the best pictures of the week from the Time magazine? So these could be the tasks, these could be the apps and the task to perform on these apps. Okay, by different or seven participants, as we said. Okay, there were seven participants. So seven participants were asked to do this, and the average time was calculated, like how much time they took to do this work. The problems and actions were observed, which is actually the essence of usability testing. The evaluators watch the participants on seeing how they use the technology in their daily routines. The problems that were identified the problems that were identified included: accessing the web was difficult. They were not able to access the web pages very fastly or efficiently. Lack of affordance and feedback. They didn't know the app's affordance. Like, for example, clicking on a button will take them where, or if the button or if the text is clickable or not. So they were not getting understanding of affordance and the feedback. Getting lost in the application was also one of the problem, and most of us, faces this. For example, if we have a new procedure to, to register a course in the Blackboard, okay, and we try to do it. So we sometime gets lost in the process because there were so many navigations available in the new updated system. So this is what happened with them also. They were having problems in knowing where to tap. Actions by evaluator. Now, these are the problems, and how did the evaluators take action on them? They reported all these problems phase by the participant to the developers. So the developers can improve the app or the iPad settings. And then the evaluators made the updates available on public group given public group called as Nelson Norman group. Accessibility is very important for all the users. The way how the users access iPad or the application inside it is very important. Study did not address how iPad would be used in people's everyday life. If you see here, we have limited number of tasks to be precisely done on a given app. So, in this, we don't have a way wherein we can say that the study would tell how the iPad works in the people's everyday life. Another study was done a year later. Another study was done a year later to examine this and other issues that there was insufficient time to address in this study. Okay, let's discuss another case study wherein remote testing with extended virtual reality or extended reality was done. This study was done at Kroon Corp, Finland, to examine the new immersive ways or engaging experiences in virtual reality. It was needed to find ways to test experts and company employees remotely because of COVID-19 pandemic. Hence, this experiment was done remotely. Also, it was also as it involved the VR and XR, it needed sophisticated setup to test the collaborative extended reality platforms across multiple locations. Testing was conducted remotely in 8 countries that included Finland, India, China, Germany, Indonesia, Malaysia, USA, and UAE. And because this study was carried out during pandemic, it has to be done remotely. Hence, additional sophisticated setups were needed at multiple locations. Some tests in participants' premises were especially required disinfecting routines, and another tests were done remotely. Little advice was available at that time how to do remote testing during pandemic. However, later to pandemic, uh, there were so many sophisticated or creative ways were designed to help remote testing. This picture shows a participant in a test session wearing a VR lens and having some tools in hand to perform some work. Here is an okay. Now, this describes the design space for VR environment. Design space is a virtual space wherein the participants, the VR, and the evaluators are present, and they help each other in creating a digital design product. Testing setup used with design space environment is given here, wherein multiple locations are given and the user participants are shown in different locations. They all seems to have a remote access, remote facilitator, remote observer, and tech support, and the participant, and a desktop participant, and an on site assistant. That was about conducting a usability testing in a remote environment. Now, let us understand what is an experiment and how it is different from usability testing. The usability testing involves the participants and the evaluator. wherein the participant is given a precise task to be performed on a digital product. And the evaluator notice them in understanding how easily or not easily the participants were able to perform this task, and all those parameters like the time required and the number of clicks required, for example, are recorded, and the data is used for improvement. Experiment is a bit different. Now, experiments are the part of research work. Usability testings are the part of improving design or digital product. In experiments, we need to have hypothesis, we need to have the variables. There are two types of variables. We will understand all of them with an example coming next. We need to have the independent variables, which are manipulated by the researcher, and the dependent variables, which are influenced by the independent variable. Typical experiment design will have one or more independent variables. The results of the experiments are to be validated statistically, and they are replicable. Let's consider an example of experiment investigating the effects of caffeine on reaction time. Caffeine is like a coffee that you drink and the reaction time on it. For example, caffeine, makes a person awake and alert because it hits the brain, and um, the person who drinks coffee feels energetic. Now, the hypothesis tells that the hypothesis is framed like this. We need to have, okay, in the experiment, we need to have hypothesis, we need to identify variables, we need to give an experimental design, the procedure, how it does, and then finally, the analysis and results and conclusion comes. The hypothesis, for example, here could be framed as consuming caffeine will lead to faster reaction times compared to not consuming caffeine. So, this is like your hypothesis. A hypothesis can be true or it can be false. So, here we are saying that a hypothesis, the researcher hypothesis that consuming caffeine will lead to faster reaction times when compared to consuming coffee and not consuming coffee. Variables here include independent variables like coffee consumption, okay, caffeine consumption, presence or absence of caffeine. Dependent variable is reaction time. So independent variable is consumption. For example, you see here in the aim of the experiment, it is already given the effect of caffeine on reaction time. So reaction time is dependent on caffeine. That's why the reaction time becomes the dependent variable. Caffeine becomes an independent variable. Experimental design. Between participants are randomly assigned to one or two groups, the caffeine group and the non-caffeine group. The caffeine group receives a dose of caffeine while the non-caffeine group receives a placebo or something which doesn't have caffeine inside it. So this is an experimental design. We have two big group of people, one given with caffeine and another one not given with coffee but with something else. Okay, so this is between the participants. Another experiment design is to use within participants. All participants undergo two conditions. One where they consume coffee, and the next time the same participants carries out the experiment without consuming coffee. The order of condition is control balance to control any order of effect. So you can execute the experiment by using this group, by giving them a coffee and the same time. And the second time, you use the same group of people to participate in the experiment. by not giving coffee to them. Or you can, change the order. Procedure. Participants complete a reaction time task before and after consuming either coffee or a non-coffee drink. For example, the reaction time is, recorded. That could have, a simple pressing button as quickly as possible when the stimulus appear on the screen. The procedure could be anything that tells the way how the reaction time is faster in the group of people who are, consuming coffee or who are not consuming coffee with a simple action. A simple action could be, pressing a button as soon as the stimulus appear on the screen or a buzzer rings. And then the time is noted from both of the groups. Analysis. The reaction times from both conditions are analyzed and statistical tests are produced to find the deviation or variation between these two groups. And in conclusion, a conclusion is given. For example, let's see how to frame a conclusion in this particular study. Based on the results, the researchers can conclude whether caffeine consumption was creating a significant effect on the research or vice versa. The findings contribute to our understanding of effects of caffeine on cognitive performance and have implications of areas such as sport performance or driver alertness. For example, if you have to drive in the night, okay, the drivers usually feel asleep. So they prefer to have a coffee on the drive. So it can be concluded that, from the result of this particular research, saying that after drinking coffee, there was, a good reaction from the people who consumed it. Hence, you can conclude that drinking coffee can be advised, wherein it has something related to the cognitive or the energetic performance, like in sports or in driving alertness. So, this is an example of an experiment. Now, let us understand more about experimental design. There are three ways, or there are three designs in experiments, in carrying out experiments. The first one is called as different participants. It is also known as between the participants. Single group of participant is allocated randomly to experimental conditions. Same participants are called as within participants. All participants participate in both the conditions. Like in our previous example, we have different participants, like participants divided into into two groups, and each single group does one job. Okay. Uh, and they are responsible for carrying out one experimental condition. For example, I can divide your class into two groups. One groups are given coffee, okay, and then they consume the coffee, and then they are asked to perform in some activity in the class. The results are recorded. Similarly, the other group is not given coffee, but rather they are given some sugary drink and they are asked to perform on a similar activity. The results are recorded. In this particular experimental design setup, it is called as different participants. Single group of participants is allocated randomly, okay, to experimental conditions. Same participants, also termed as within participants, wherein I will not divide your class into two groups, but I will make all of you drink coffee one day and do some activity. Next day, I will not give you coffee, rather, I will give you water and ask you to do the similar task. The results are recorded both the days and they are compared. This is an example of same participants. Matched participants is a third experimental design. It is done in a pairwise design. For example, participants are matched or they are coupled in pairs, for example, based on expertise or gender and so on. For example, in matched participants, I can, make you groups in the lab to work on a project based on your performance or based on your perfection on some skills that can help you to do a project together. So this is called as matched participants. Here in this table, we see the design, experiment types, different, same, and match, their advantages and disadvantages. If we have different, the first one, different participants, then order doesn't affect. For example, I divided your class into two groups, one with coffee, one without coffee. Okay, and both of you do the work. So here the order doesn't matter. Which group works, which group is asked to work first or later, or both of them can work in the same time, one after the other. All this doesn't matter. The order doesn't affect because we have different people to work on, different groups to work on. Disadvantages, many subjects and individual differences causes a problem. You have so many participants to do the work. So you need to have dedicated groups to do, to work with different conditions of the research. If you have same people, okay, advantages, it needs few people to work, no individual differences are needed. Okay, for example, counterbalancing needed because of ordering effects. So here, if for example, if I am using the whole class, okay, to not drink the coffee and do the work, or drink the coffee and do the work, here the order matters. Which activity is done first, which activity should be done later matters, because the same people are going to do the work. It's like, uh, okay, for example, five students selected randomly in the class and they are asked to write the test, surprise test, for example. Okay. And second day, the same five students are asked to rewrite the test after studying the course. So here, after or not after studying the course or before studying the course, writing the test, of course, matters, right? So here, balancing or ordering effects are there. Match. It is more as different participant, but individual differences are reduced because we have matched people. We do not have many subjects here. For example, I can give, instead of asking the whole class to work on some project, I will divide the class into group of three students, okay, and match them with their uh, expertise to work on one project. So here, as we have few participants, the individual differences are reduced. But disadvantage is that it cannot be sure of perfect matching on all differences. You know this, when we make the project groups, okay, one of the participant may not be willing to work as more actively as others, and then you face problems. Okay, so every time the matchmaking can, not be good sometime also. That was all about conducting experiments and experimental designs. Now, let us see, what do we mean by in the wild studies or in the wild evaluations. In the wild, studies or evaluations refers to the research conducted in real world environment. That could be home, workplace, or public space. The aim of wild studies is to notice how people naturally react with technology in their daily lives and how it impacts their behavior and experience. In the wild, studies are used in product designs. While trying to perform the in the wild studies, the following uh, of things are taken care. For example, the first one, identifying opportunities for new technology, determining design requirements, design how best to introduce new technology, evaluate technology in use. So, all these things are like in the wild studies. They are done in natural settings. Okay. In the wild is a term for prototype being used freely in natural settings with broader and typical but less controlled than the traditional field studies. It is seek to understand what users do naturally and how technology is impacting them. For example, nowadays we all make use of Google Maps so evidently and so frequently. So the drivers, it has the Google Maps have actually changed the behavior of drivers or any travelers rather. They all, for example, if I want to visit you in a different country, then I would ask you to give me your location pin. Okay, and then using the location pin, I can fly and also come back to meet you in a different place, entirely different area, entirely different place. Nowadays, the travelers' habit of reaching to a place have become dependent on Google Maps. This is how the Google Maps have changed the behavior of tracking a place. Okay, and noticing all these changes from the real users in the less controlled environment is called as in the wild studies. The advantage of carrying out in the wild studies empower the evaluators to identify new opportunities for a new technology. It also helps them determine design requirements, also help them to decide how best to introduce new technology and evaluate technology in use. Here is an example of a pain monitoring device given to the patients after their surgery. The pain pad comprised of numbers from 0 through 10, with 10 being the highest and 0 being the lowest level of pain. The patients were monitored, okay, by giving them the pain pad. Usually, monitoring the pain in the patients is a challenging task for physicians. Hence, this pain pad was introduced. The goal of the study was to evaluate the use of pain monitoring device for use after ambulatory surgery. Pain pad is a keypad device. Pain pad is a keypad device. It was usability tested extensively in the lab before being brought into two hospitals. So, by this, you understand already that the pain pad was actually tested in the control environment and then it was brought to to hospitals. The goal was to understand how pain pad was used in natural environment as a part of routines into UK hospitals. How pain monitoring changed with the pain pad. The data collection and the participation of the pain pad included 13 males, 41 females. Privacy was an important concern. Hospital stay was arranged for 1 to 7 days. And the mean age of the participants were 64, was ranging from 64.6 to 64.5 years. Patients were given pain pads after the surgery and were prompted to report pain levels every 2 hours. Nurses also collected the scores. So, nurses were also collecting the pain score, and the pain pad was also given to the patients. And these patients involved 13 males and 41 females, and their hospital stay was arranged. All the data was entered into charts. Patients in one hospital were given a user satisfaction survey when they left the hospital. Also rated pain pad on a scale of 1 to 5, Likert scale. Now let us see how the data was analyzed, which were collected from the nurses, and the pain pad, which was collected from the nurses, okay, and the pain pad. Three types of data were collected. First, the satisfaction. Second, the patient compliance. And the third one is the pain pad data compared with the nurses. Now let us see how the satisfaction level was calculated. Satisfaction with the pain pad was based on questionnaire responses. Like did they like the for example, it could include how easy was accessing the pain pad for the patient. Okay, patient compliance with the 2 hour routine, like how much duration was given, like how often duration was expected from the patient compliance every 2 hours of routine, you know, like how many of the patients have used the pain pad with this given window of time. How data was collected or gathered from the pain pad compared with the data collected by the nurses. Data showed satisfaction with pain pad 4.63 was given on the Likert scale. Patient compliance was mixed. Some liked it while others disliked it or did not notice the prompt. Patient also recorded more scores with the pain pad than from the nurses. So you can see that the data was analyzed based on these three parameters, and these were the results for these parameters. The satisfaction with the pain pad was 4.63. The patient compliance for every 2 hours, some of them did, some of them did not like, and some of them did not notice the prompt at all. The third one, like who brought more data, the pain pads or the nurses? It was recorded that pain pad brought more scores than the nurses. Now let us talk about long-term studies. Some studies involve leaving the designs or the product with the participants for extended period so that the participants have time to know how to use a product on their own settings. Typically, these are complex technical products that take time for the participant to learn, such as a visualizing tool. These evaluations often start with an interview, and then the product is left with the participants for 2 to 4 weeks. Data is then collected, often consisting of structured interviews, daily use diaries, automated logging of usage, and then the evaluation is completed. This is an exam. This is the way how the long-term studies are conducted. How many participants? Now let us see how many participants are enough for UT or user testing or usability testing. The number is a practical issue. As you saw that in the experiment that was done on a pain pad, we needed or it involved 13 males and 41 females. And then also the hospital stay was arranged for 1 to 7 days. All these things makes the usability testing an expensive evaluation. Hence, the schedule for testing becomes very important. Availability of the participants becomes very important. The cost of running a test is very crucial. Typically, 5 to 10 participants, if possible, are sufficient to carry out user testing or usability testing. Some experts argue that testing should continue until no new insights or errors are gained. Others suggest that 5 participants are enough to identify any serious problem because the user testing or usability testing is an expensive evaluation Considering these three things, schedule, availability, and cost, are very important. How many participants are enough? Okay, now let's see how many participants is enough for other types of evaluation. Okay, now let's talk about this was about the user testing. Now let's talk about experiment. Experiment test hypothesis to discover new knowledge by investigating the relationship between two or more variables. Hence, the number of participants needed depends on the type of experiment being conducted. It is always advisable to consult a statistician before deciding. In the wild, studies also vary from a few people in a home to a software team to a whole community. So it means that when we are trying to do an experiment, how many participants are needed? That depends on the type of experiment being conducted. And for sure, when you are trying to carry out an research experiment, then consult a statistician before deciding the number of people. In the wild studies, the number of participants can range from very few people at your home to a whole software team in the community. Now, let us see the practical differences between usability testing and research. Usability testing helps you to improve the product. Research environment or experiment for research helps you discover knowledge. In usability testing, few participants are sufficient. However, in research experiment, the more number of participants, the better. In usability testing, results inform designs. In research experiment, results are validated statistically. Usability testing usually not completely usability testings are usually not completely replicable. Research experiments must be replicable. In usability testing, conditions controlled as much as possible. But in research environment or in research experiment, the conditions are strongly controlled. In usability testing, procedures are planned. And in the environmental research, experimental design is important. Here, procedures are planned, here, experiments are designed. In usability testing, results are reported to the developers to improve the product. However, in the research experiment, the results are reported to the scientific community. Hence, the summary includes usability. Hence, the summary enlightens or focus on usability testing that take place in controlled spaces that include usability lab and temporary lab. Usability testing focus on performance measures, how long and how many errors are made when completing a set of predefined tasks. Indirect observations like video and keystrokes logging are noted or recorded. User satisfaction questionnaires and interviews are also collected. Remote testing have been conducted since the early 1990s, but it became important during the COVID-19 pandemic. Remote testing uses portable equipments, video and audio recording using smartphones, mobile eye tracking, and automated keystrokes logging. Long-term studies of several weeks are used to evaluate complex products that participants need time to learn, and they are given and they are done at their own. Experiment test like hypothesis by manipulating experiment test a hypothesis by manipulating certain variables while keeping other constant. Independent variables and dependent variables are very important while conducting the experiments. In the wild, studies are carried out in natural settings to discover how people interact with the technology in the real world. Prototypes or technologies are tested in the wild studies in the natural settings. Sometimes the finding of in the world studies are unexpected, especially for studies that explore how novel technologies are used by participants in their own homes, places of work, or outside the work. This completes the discussion of chapter 15. And your lab 7 and 8 is based on chapter 15 and 16. Thank you for listening.